Thanks for joining us for today's Bloomerang webinar, 7 Keys to Success in High-Stakes Asking. My name is Stephen Shattuck, and I'm the VP of Marketing here at Bloomerang, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. And today I'm just really excited to be joined by our very special guest today. He's our good friend, Kent Stroman. Hey there, Kent.
Hi, Stephen.
Thanks for being here. Thanks for taking an hour out of your day. For those of you who don't know Kent, Kent is just a really great speaker. He's a published author, and he's been in the nonprofit sector working since 1976. He's been involved in teaching, organizational leadership. He's impacted a lot of organizations with his passion for fundraising and all the tips that he's going to share with us today. And since then, he's actually launched his own consulting practice, which is called Stroman and Associates. They work in fundraising, board governance, strategic planning, and leadership development. They're just a great organization. They're a Bloomerang partner, and they're great friends of ours. So it's really a treat to have Kent here with us. I'm really excited. If you don't believe I am excited to have Kent, just ask anyone in his office. I have been absolutely hounding them, driving them crazy, I'm sure, trying to get Kent to join us because his presentation is really superb. He's a thought leader in the industry, and everyone listening now is really going to benefit from his teaching. So Kent, thanks again for joining us. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Oh, you're welcome, Stephen. I appreciate the opportunity.
So what's going to happen here today is Kent's going to kick things off. He's got some slides to share with us. He's going to run through his presentation. And then when he's done, we're going to jump right into an interactive question and answer session, as we always do on our webinars. So if you hear anything that maybe you'd like explained further, elaborated on, or any general questions for Kent, please feel free to send those over through the chat window right there on your webinar screen. I'll see those, and I'll be fielding those to Kent during the Q&A session. So you've got a leading expert here in fundraising for the next hour. Please take advantage of it. Ask away, and we'll try to get to as many questions as we can before the 2 o'clock hour. So I'm not going to take any more time away. Kent, I'm going to hand it off to you to get us started.
Well, thanks, Steve. And again, I appreciate the opportunity to connect with your audience, and thank you for that nice introduction. And as we get started today, again, our topic is 7 keys to success in high-stakes asking. And our focus really is on fundraising and what we would call major gifts fundraising. But as we go along, I would just encourage everyone to think beyond that. All of us are involved in high-stakes asking. And take just a moment. When you think about high-stakes decision, what comes to mind? Maybe just pause and jot some notes down. I will tell you that when I think of high-stakes decisions, certainly the giving of gifts is big. I will tell you that yesterday I received a request, which for me was kind of a high-stakes ask. I was invited to chair the governance committee for a board that I serve on. It may not seem like high stakes, but if I'm going to do it, it's going to be something that I'll take seriously. Other things that come to my mind would include asking for a job, perhaps asking for a promotion, a raise, a new career opportunity, maybe an opportunity of any kind. Here's another one. How about asking for someone's hand in marriage? But as you think about a decision that has big consequences, could be any number of things. And so we'll like I said earlier, we'll begin primarily focusing around the idea of fundraising. But when we're involved in high-stakes asks, my suggestion is that first of all, we begin by answering the question, why? The decision, one that has high stakes behind it. And think about the why behind your organization. What is your purpose? Why does your charitable organization exist? And as you think about that, I always encourage that we put a name and a face on the mission. If you can convey to your audience the really heart of your mission, or the core, who it is we serve, how their life is different as a result of of our work, our mission, our ministry, what have you. That's the why. When I think about my own situation, I'm going to just share something that's a little bit of a personal nature, but I'm going to share with you my why. So you probably saw on the earlier slide that my purpose in life is to equip, inspire, and encourage. That's a big part of the why of my life. That's my purpose. And then you see my passion. And I do have a passion for high-impact fundraising, not just getting by. And so many times the organizations that we encounter, their definition of success is kind of doing what we did last year, maybe a little bit better, 1, 2, 3, maybe 5% increase. But my passion is really for high-impact fundraising. And the definition that I would put behind that is one where after a gift is made, that there's a celebration on the part of the one who is giving and those who are receiving. So that's my passion. My vision is to equip the next 2 generations of fundraisers for true success. And by fundraisers, I mean both professionals and volunteers. I'd be interested to know of those who are online today. Right now I see there's 114 attendees. Would be interested to know how many are professionals, do this for a living, how many are fundraisers, how many are volunteers. I guess all volunteers maybe are fundraisers, put that together. But that is just a glimpse into my why. But by understanding my own why, or in your situation, understanding your why, puts us in a position really to communicate effectively when the stakes are high and when it's time for a major decision. And so let's move on then to tip number 2, or key number 2. And that is, when we are doing high-stakes asking, adopt a process that works. And there are a lot of different processes that can be used, but for whatever the decision is, I find it's helpful for us to define a path between the beginning and the end. So we think about the alphabet. How do we get from A to Z? Well, fortunately, in school, each of us learned the alphabet, a little song that goes with it. I'm going to be merciful and not sing that song to you. But when you think about that sequence, is there a process that you have that helps serve your interests and the interests of those that you're approaching in fundraising, a process that really works? I'm just going to share an example of something that's been very effective in our work. We call it the 10-step staircase. And if you'll notice at the top, there's a door at the top of the stairs. It's marked yes. And in fundraising, of course, we want to see that yes door open. On step number 10, you'll see it's identified asking. And yet there are 9 steps that precede that. So picture yourself with me, if you would, at the foot of those stairs in the stairway, wanting to get through the yes door. Now, if we were in person, you would make an immediate recognition that my legs are longer than a normal person. And, I can take steps 2, maybe 3 at a time. If I really take a run at it, I might get 4 steps at a time. But no matter how big the step is, I can't get through that with only 1 step. And that's the way that I find that it works also in major gifts fundraising. It takes more than 1 step for us with our prospective donor to get from nowhere to somewhere. And so we've broken these 10 steps down, as you can see, getting acquainted, introducing the project on step 2. On step 3, it says we're asking about giving. Step 4, asking about purpose. 5 is asking about form. And then 6, that's a big one, asking about amount. And by the way, we believe that the answer to all these questions belongs to the donor, not to the fundraiser. And so in our approach with our philosophy, we never show up and say, hi, we've decided that you should give a gift of X. Rather, I want to engage the donor in the process and ask them, what's your definition of success for this? Where can you see yourself being involved? And then we move on up to step number 7, where we're asking about timing. And then on 8, naming if that's appropriate. And on step number 9, deciding. How do you go about deciding on something like this? And then at step number 10, we're actually asking for the gift. Now, the point in all this is that we have a process. And when there's a process in place, number 1, it helps me know what I should expect of myself. And secondly, it helps us to be able to assist donors as they make their decisions by giving them an idea of what they should expect. And actually, that kind of ties into what I'm going to point out as step number 3, and that is to learn how to ask. Once you identify a process, even if it's the one I just pointed out, it's one thing to see somebody else's process, but whatever you choose, make it your own. Let it kind of belong to you and be comfortable for you. And so that's really a lot of what key number 3 is about when we talk about learn how to ask. We're asking for a decision. And so if you're going to be effective in learning how, in my experience, it's essential that you would equip yourself by someone outside yourself. Now, I don't know about you. Some people are identified as fast learners. Some are slow learners, and then there's some others that maybe just aren't learners at all. Those people I don't think are on the phone today. But whether fast or slow, the assistance of somebody else in the training and equipping process is essential. I want to commend all, 128 now, all 128 people who are on today's webinar. I want to commend each of you for taking the time and making the investment to enhance your asking abilities. Let me just give an example again of a way to equip yourself to learn how to ask. And you see on the screen there the Institute for Conversational Fundraising, and you can see what our mission is, equipping leaders to dramatically transform their fundraising results. A variety of ways through which we do that, but I will tell you the most impactful is shown on the right-hand side there. It's the Asking Academy. And this is a very in-depth program. It spans 5 months, but right at the core is a very in-depth, on-site, person-to-person, what we call the summit, where we're not only learning about what to do, but we're actually doing it. We're practicing. We're getting evaluation from others. And so when you think about learning how to ask, this is just another example of some of the kinds of tools that are out there where people who have accomplished and created success in their own life are able to share and learn from each other. So let's move on now to key number 4. And we find that we can be more effective with asking if we will practice not asking for the decision. Now, there's a time to ask, and there's a time to not ask. One of the problems that many fundraisers encounter who talk to me is all they know how to do is ask for gifts. And if all we do is ask for gifts, we are unfortunately not equipping those who we would serve with the opportunity to have input into the process. And I'm just going to share this saying. I'm sure many of you in fundraising have heard this before. The longer I live, the more on target I believe this is. And the saying goes, if you want advice, ask for money. But if you want money, ask for advice. Now, perhaps you've had the experience that I have. Walk up to somebody and I say, hi, my name's Kent. I work for XYZ charity. We don't have any money. You do. Can we have it? So all of a sudden I've asked for money. And immediately the response that I get is, well, I'll tell you what, young man. Well, I guess nobody says young man anymore. But I'll tell you what. And they go on to give me some advice. It may be advice that I was looking for, maybe advice that I would never have asked for. So we ask for money, we get advice. And yet on the other side of that equation is, if you want money, ask for advice. So what kind of advice do we ask for? These are examples of not asking for a gift. So I will ask for advice along these lines. We've envisioned a major capital fundraising project. You've supported us in the past. You've been very engaged, not only financially, but also by sharing your thoughts and your input. This is another one of those times when I would love to hear your thoughts with regards to our plans, so that as we refine them going forward, we'll have the benefit of the thinking of someone who's outside our organization, outside the boardroom, what have you. Great example of asking for advice. And the neat thing that happens when we do that is the advice giver, in essence, gets up off of their side of the table, walks around to our side of the table, and essentially they join our team. So as is the case with each of those 9 steps before asking on the staircase, we're practicing not asking for a gift or not asking for a decision. Another example of not asking for a decision is what we use with every major ask in fundraising is a very simple gift proposal. And so one of the ways that we don't ask for gifts is early on during those cultivation visits, the get acquainted or advice visits. One of the things that I want to ask early on is, may I have your permission to prepare a gift proposal that would be exactly right for you? And then I'll follow that up by saying, what I'd love to do is to engage you in dialogue about the project, to the point that when I do have a gift proposal, it's one that would be shaped by you as a result of your input. So I want to understand what your priorities and preferences are, where this fits in your overall scheme of things. And so again, this is an example of not asking for a gift. And so we have, in that sense, reserved the right to ask later, which allows us to simply discuss, converse beforehand, so that when it is time to do the then asking, we're doing it on a very intentional and well-informed basis. So key number 4 is to practice not asking for the decisions. Now, with that, I'm going to move on to, this is familiar, right? We just looked at the 10-step staircase earlier. But again, just want to underscore that there are 9 steps on here that are steps for not asking for the decision. They're asking about input that will go into that decision. The key, in order for this to be effective, is we have to be sincere. And one of the things that I would request, and that is, if you can't be sincere in asking for advice, in asking for feedback, and eventually be sincere in asking for a gift, there really is no room in our profession for insincerity. And so if you can't do that, please find a job in some other sector. I'm sure there'll be a place for you there. And so with that, let's move on to number 5. And on this, we call it put time on your side. So the question is, when it comes to high stakes asking, how much time do we have in order to get to a yes decision? Let me just share a story from my adolescence. I was in a hurry. I wanted to borrow my dad's car because I had a date on Friday evening, and I was just thinking how impressive it would be if I showed up in the family car instead of my 1951 Chevy sedan. And so, actually I'd never borrowed my dad's car before, and I don't know if they'd even had a date before, so it was kind of a big deal for me. And so it was Monday night. My dad was watching Monday Night Football, which he loved to do, and I was sitting there in the living room on another chair watching him watch football and trying to summon the courage within me to ask him, could I borrow the family car? So I sat and I watched him watch the football game. And back in those days, there wasn't the kind of remote control that we have today. Actually, I was the remote control. He would say, I can't change the channel. And so I'd go up and twist, changing from one channel to the next. Fortunately, there were only 3 options, so that didn't take long. If the sound was too soft or too loud, I was the remote. I'd get up and twist the dial for the sound control. If necessary, might even have to adjust the rabbit ears on top or move the aluminum foil around to catch a signal a little bit better. So I waited, and finally a commercial came along, an advertisement, and so I jumped in with both feet, and I asked my dad, could I borrow the car Friday night? Well, I think the question probably took him as much by surprise as I would have expected. But it switched back to the football game, and he didn't respond. And so I waited and I waited and I waited, and pretty soon another commercial came on. So I said, how about it? Can I borrow the car? And my dad turned, and he said to me, he said, Kent, how soon do you need a decision? If you have to know right now, I can give you a quick decision. Well, there was something about the way he asked that question that gave me a clue that if I had to press too hard, too fast, that I could quickly get a no. And so I thought about it a little bit longer, and on the next commercial I said, I've got as much time as you need in order to get to yes. So I want to suggest that when it comes to fundraising, if we're in a big hurry, that we should anticipate either no answers to our gift proposals or to hear yes at minimal levels. So in order for us to be effective and put time on our side, there are 2 risks that we want to avoid. And I call these, number 1, the risk of early rejection, and number 2, the risk of early acceptance. So what is early rejection? Early rejection is where, again, prematurely, we're introduced to someone, we ask for a gift, and it's easy for them simply to say no. We've asked, they responded, and we're done, and they're done. And we hear no because they haven't come to a place where they're prepared to say yes. So one of the risks that we want to avoid is the risk of early rejection. Risk number 2 is the risk of early acceptance. And that's one where we make the ask too early and they say yes too early. Sure, here's a check, it's $1,000. And we think, my goodness, they could easily have given $100,000, perhaps $1 million, but they wrote us a check for $1,000. Well, tell me this, if a prospect with that capacity has given it that in response to our request, how soon can we go back and ask for the rest of the zeros? I'm going to say not soon at all and not easily. That would require a great deal of delicacy in order to do that anytime. And so the antidote, if you would, for these 2 risks, early rejection and early acceptance, is to find out the answer to this question: when is the right time for you to make a gift of major importance? It's a high-stakes ask, a high-stakes decision. Let's let the decider advise us when is the right time. And by doing that, we avoid the peril of either one of these two risks. So the companion that I would put with that is never ask a question of your prospective funder for which you're not prepared to receive either response. And if we had time, and perhaps we can do this on some other occasion, talk through the kinds of questions that would be asked on each of the steps going up the staircase. But when we understand the timing for the donor or the timing for the decider, it will help us know when it's the right time that we should be asking. So key number 5, put time on your side. Is the decision urgent? Is it important? Is the timeline in line for the person for whom we're asking? So let's move on now, if we could, and that is to go to key number 6. And when we think about 7 keys to success in high-stakes asking, we one of those, the barriers. What are the barriers to high-stakes asking? Well, over the last, let's see, not last year, but the 2 years before that, I had the opportunity in a variety of all across the country to ask fundraising leaders this question, the question you see on your screen. What is your biggest obstacle to success in one-on-one fundraising? Kind of open-ended, but I was very interested to hear the variety of responses that might come from that. What is your biggest obstacle to successful one-on-one fundraising? So over a period of 2 years, I got responses to that question from 456 fundraisers, some volunteers, some professional staff. And as you can see, they couldn't all give me only one answer to the question. Those 456 people provided 582 responses. And we boiled those responses down into 33 categories, actually 34 if you include the favorite, which is called miscellaneous. But I will tell you that those categories surprised me. And let me just share those with you briefly. As you look at the screen, you will see how that breaks out. And in fact, if you want to see a more in-depth discussion of these obstacles, and not just the obstacle, but the solutions that pair with them, a big part of this is included in the 2nd edition of my book, which just came out last month. And the title of the book is Asking, Mastering the Art of Conversational Fundraising. And in the book, you'll see again the categories that are on your screen right now. I'll tell you what I expected. From earlier response, I expected that the number 1 category was going to be fear. And it ranks quite high, but you'll notice that there are 3 other obstacles that were rated even higher than fear. One has to do with time. Another one has to do with prospect identification. But the number 1 obstacle to one-on-one fundraising, as you can see at the very top, is what's called difficulty getting in. Answering the question, how can I connect with people that I'm not either already connected with or that are busy enough that it's easy for them to say no when I reach out to them for a cultivation visit or a solicitation visit. And so here's what I want to say first of all. Whatever your obstacle is, you can rest in confidence that you are not alone. You're in great company. And you can see any number of obstacles that your peers, your colleagues face. And so don't let your circumstance feel like you're the only one. But the fact that you're not alone, there's still an obstacle. And so the question is, how are we going to deal with those obstacles? A couple of the ones that I just want to mention in particular, I'm going to just handpick 5 of them from the top end of this scale. One is, and this is a big one, it's called relationship deficit. And we have a relationship anytime that, we have a relationship deficit when there's not enough relational capital built up to carry a conversation, a contact, or an appointment. What's an example of that? Let's say there's someone who is a philanthropic individual. They're known throughout the community as being generous and passionate about various charitable causes. And so we come up with the idea perhaps they could, should, might support our charitable initiative. And somebody says, well, why don't you go call on them? All of a sudden I think, I don't know them and they don't know me. Well, that's an example of a relationship deficit. And whether I'm in a professional capacity or a volunteer role, I have nowhere to go. And in fact, just yesterday I was working with a very, a group of fundraisers who are very dedicated to expanding their skills. And we started thinking about some ways that we can create relationships even before they're needed. In fact, it reminds me of a quote that I heard recently attributed to a man, and he said, he described someone as a person who dug a well before they needed water. Well, if we wait until we need water to start digging a well, we're going to get thirsty and stay that way for a long, long time. And I'm going to say the same thing happens in our relationships. If we wait to create a relationship until we need to ask someone to assist us with something, we're going to be far behind time. That's one of the obstacles I wanted to mention is relationship deficit. And let me encourage each of us as fundraisers, as volunteers, and as individuals involved in various walks of life. Be intentional about your relationships. Look for ways to meet people that you don't already know. Allow others the opportunity to get to know you. Put that know, like, and trust factor on your side. People want to do business with people they know and they like and they trust. And so if you aren't known, you can't be liked and you won't be trusted. So I go to intentionally building up your relationships. The second one I want to mention is conflicting priorities, and that's a big area of obstacle. And one of the things that surprised me when that popped up was that oftentimes the conflicting priorities that are inhibitors to major gifts fundraising exist inside the organization. So we've got one person raising money for scholarships, someone else raising money for the new athletic stadium, somebody else raising money for the classroom building. And those conflicts of priorities get magnified when we push them out into the philanthropic marketplace. A huge obstacle. Here's obstacle number 3, and it's mindset. I wish we had time to fully exhaust this one, but mindset as an obstacle to fundraising, in essence, boils down to this. It's a predetermined conviction that someone couldn't, wouldn't, shouldn't support our project. So I go out to my friend Elizabeth, and I'm going to ask her for a contribution. And I approach it from the standpoint, Elizabeth, you wouldn't want to support our project with a gift, would you? And immediately her head is shaking no. She's simply agreeing with me. Well, usually we don't come right out and say it that way, but we don't, either we don't have a conviction or a passion in favor of the project, or we constrain ourselves. We don't reveal that passion. And so our mindset in and of itself becomes a detriment. One of the things we can do in this area is what we mentioned before, and that's to put a name and a face on the mission. And as we do, then it gives us an opportunity to share that story with someone else, talk about the circumstances, the unfortunate circumstances that exist before we come to the party, how we serve people in need, and how their life is different as a result. When we do that, we're able to share a positive mindset, and it will be easy for others to kind of get on board with whatever the project is. The fourth one I'll mention is fear, and I touched on that before. But essentially, we are either fearing failure, fearing rejection, fearing that we're going to hear the word no. And one of the best ways that we have to deal with fear is to, get out of the business of asking questions that generate fear. And so rather than just showing up and jumping to step 10, asking for a generous contribution, instead, we want to ask people if they even have an interest in what we're interested. If they don't, let's bless them and send them on their way. Perhaps even help them find projects, priorities that do fit their preferences. My experience has been, if we pursue a relationship rather than pursuing a transaction, it will almost automatically remove the fear in and of itself. And then number 5, which I mentioned earlier, that's difficulty getting in. And probably the number one tip that we can give as it relates to overcoming that obstacle is to engage others in the process. We recommend always using a call team that consists of the CEO of the organization and then someone who is in a peer role with the prospective giver. And so if as a fundraiser, if I'm asking somebody to come to a cultivation lunch, that invitation is going to come across very differently than if I am if this is a business and more of a peer relationship where the invitation is coming and the CEO is going to join us. The whole topic of difficulty getting in is almost inexhaustible, but hopefully you get the idea of some of the examples that go with that. And so again, just to recap, we've said that we want to bulldoze the barriers, identify the barriers that stand between you and success in high-stakes asking. Once you identify it, come up with a strategy for removing that obstacle. And if you ever feel like you're stuck, I'll just share this quote with you, and that is, wherever you are, your location becomes your destination only if you stop moving. So don't stop moving. And again, commend you for being involved with professional development opportunities like you are today. And here is key number 7, and that is to celebrate your success. Too often I encounter people who they work hard, they achieve success, and then they ignore it and go on to working hard. When there is a successful conclusion, celebrate it. Give yourself permission to feel good about, yes, you've worked hard. Your donor has placed themselves in the process. They've invested energy and time as well as money. Let's find an appropriate way to celebrate the result. Let me just tell you that yesterday afternoon, a client, and I wasn't able to take the call, so they left a message which I was thrilled to receive, and that is that they had made a solicitation call earlier this week, and the result was they received a gift commitment which will span several years, but it's $1.6 million. Now, I haven't seen or heard the party yet that goes with that, but I think it's time for a celebration. Wouldn't you agree? And so celebrate your success. Give yourself permission to feel good about yes. And here's another reminder. You've all heard the story of a turtle on a fence post. And there's a quote that says, anytime you see a turtle on top of a fence post, you know he had some help getting there. And whenever we see success in our fundraising efforts, it's never a single-handed thing. I don't know if Stephen mentioned this, but I had background in higher education, and I was in a university setting for 25 years. when we received those large gifts and when there was time for a celebration, I always looked for an opportunity to incorporate the faculty and other staff members, the administration, into that, because the only way someone would make a contribution to an institution of higher learning is if they have confidence that what's taking place in the classroom is effective, that it's worthy. And that can only happen by the dedication of the faculty. And so, again, when we have that celebration, realize you may be sitting on top of the fence post, but you didn't put yourself there. It took a lot of other resources to get you to that particular point. So celebrate. Don't do it alone. And as we wrap up the what shall I call this, the monologue part of today's webinar, I want to share my top tip, and that is just ask. I think a lot of times it's easy for us to become paralyzed. We're going to wait until everything is perfectly in place, and then we'll make our request. Well, let me give you a simple mathematical formula here. First of all, start off with a healthy degree of curiosity. And then add to that some good old-fashioned courage, and the result will be a bold ask. A bold ask. And so whatever that high-stakes decision is, let me just give you this encouragement. If you would, a thumb in the back, just ask. And as we wrap up, I just want to share this thought, and that is that in essence, all of us are leading from some role of, or we're raising funds in some kind of a leadership role. And I want to just circle back around to what I mentioned earlier, and that is the second edition, recently released, Asking About Asking. If you don't already have the book, get one. They're available at Amazon, at Barnes & Noble, or from the publisher at Charity Channel. And consider maybe equipping those around you, other staff members, board members, other volunteers, providing them with their own copy. So as we wrap up, I want to encourage you to identify one thing, just at least one thing that we touched on today that you would say, this is something I can put to work in my own life, in my own fundraising activity. This is something that I could do even today. And take that one thing, put it to work, and allow it to work for you. As I wrap up my comments, I just want to share this as a matter of perspective, and that is that people are more important than ideas. Be attentive to your people. Ideas are more important than things. Don't let things take the wrong place in your priorities. Things are more important, I think, than nothing, and nothing is more important than love. And so as you go out in your work, in your life, let love guide you in your activities. And with that, I want to say a big thank you. And then, Stephen, I think you're going to field some questions for us.
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Ken. You just shared incredible knowledge with everyone listening. I mean, that was a great presentation. Thanks so much. Yeah, we've got about 10 minutes left for Q&A. I know there were some questions that came through while Kent was presenting, but if you were maybe waiting on a question or trying to think of something, please don't be shy about sending those through the chat box there. We'll answer as many as we can over the next 10 or 12 minutes. And like I said before, you've got Ken on the line. He is a renowned expert. Don't let this opportunity go by. Ask him anything, and we'll share some of his knowledge with you. But Ken, I'm just going to roll through some questions that have already been asked to get started. And I think that tips number 3 and 4 really got people's juices flowing. Kelly here was asking, at what point in the process do you not ask? So when do you ask for the advice? Do you set a first meeting with a potential donor to ask for that advice, or does that come in later meetings? What's kind of the chronology look like, when you attempt to do that? Yeah,
so good question, and that was Kelly, right?
Yeah, Kelly.
So here's what I'd say about that, Kelly. First of all, the learning how to not ask is how to not ask for the decision, and in this case, not ask for the gift. And so essentially, step 10 is asking for the gift. Everything leading up to that is not asking for the gift, but it is asking. It's asking for advice, for input, for insight. And so all along the way, you're going to be asking. You're just not going to be asking, can I have a check? I will tell you that in that process, one of my favorite questions actually occurs on, well, this is so small I can't read it. I think it's on step number 4. But it's asking about purpose. And one of the questions that I love to ask is, what would you like your gift to accomplish? So I'm not asking for a gift, but I'm asking about a gift. And when I ask a question like that, the answer that I hear almost always reveals the soul of the giver. And once I can get a glimpse into the soul of the giver, it makes all the difference in the world in how and when that we ask for the gift.
Mm-hmm. Hey, I absolutely love those guiding questions that you've been suggesting. You know, what would you like that gift to do, and when would be a good time to give? Those are awesome guiding questions that hopefully people will start using that have been listening. So we've got another question, came from Angela, and literally as soon as she typed it out, I was thinking the exact same question. She asks, what clues do you look for when you're trying to decide when the right time to ask? So, you know, you were a higher ed fundraiser for 25 years. I'm sure you took a lot of meetings. Was there ever an instance where you were in a meeting and you were talking to the potential donor and you could kind of tell that maybe this was not the right time or this was the right time to ask? You know, what were those sort of clues from the other person, if any?
Okay, so Angela, that's a really good question. And in responding to it, I have to tell you this. I've come to be very suspicious of my detection of clues. And Stephen, the way you laughed, I think you must have some similar experience.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But almost any time I respond to a clue, I'm more likely to misinterpret than to correctly interpret. And so, yes, we want to be actively listening, but rather than acting on clues, what I'm going to do is ask about clues. And so, for example, I'll give you a real life response to that. I was working with a gentleman who, for a variety of reasons, it was crucial that he make his gift commitment to a major campaign that we were involved in. And so there's some urgency behind this. And he says, well, this was a conversation taking place in January. He said, I can't make my pledge until after I get with my tax guy. That was his words, my tax guy. And so now keep in mind, I'm a CPA. I kind of have a little bit of understanding of this tax scenario. This was in January, and so I was immediately inclined to take that clue and interpret it and come up with an answer for him. The question is when. Now, if you were to hear a comment like that, what would that mean to you? Naturally, I would think, well, he's talking about tax guy, April 15th. But I just asked, I said, his name was John, so I said, John, I got to ask, when you say get with your tax guy, are you one of those early filers, one of those overachievers that at the end of February 1st, or excuse me, end of January 1st to February, you're going to be getting with your tax guy, or you're going to do it on schedule sometime around the middle of April, or are you going to file a 6-month extension and get with your tax guy about 10 months from now? And of course, we chuckled a little bit about that, made it a playful inquiry. But he went on to say, you know, we'll be getting together sometime late March, early April. So I want to listen for clues, but then ask for confirmation. And probably the most blatant ask, if you would, is at the on that step. I think it's step number 7, where we're asking about timing. And the way that I like to ask that question is, John, Louise, what we're talking about here sounds like a major decision for a gift of this magnitude, when would be the right time for you to make that kind of decision? And then let them answer it and respond to their timetable rather than superimposing our timetable on them.
So maybe not rush to interpret those signals, but maybe just ask the question. That's pretty good advice.
Thank you.
We've got probably about 5 minutes more for questions. Got a couple here. Phil was wondering, is there a rule of thumb on how to determine the size of a gift? And I know you talked about not asking too early and possibly shortchanging yourself, but how do you decide how many zeros to add on to the end of that amount? To use your word.
Phil, I love your question, and to me, the question about amount and what amount to ask for, I think is a prime example of a mistake that we make, and that is the belief that we should answer the question. And I know that there's a prevailing philosophy in the fundraising profession that says we should show up and decide in advance. We're asking them for $100,000, $1 million, $10 million. I believe that's a big mistake. I think it's the wrong person answering the question. So, in response to your question, we always work with a gift chart. And regardless of the size of the project, whether you're raising $1,000 for support for your mission trip personally, or whether you're raising $100 million for the major capital campaign, I believe it's essential for us to have a gift chart for a couple of reasons. The first one is so that we know what we're looking for. Is the top gift that's necessary to make our project successful, is it $1,000, $10,000, $100,000, $1 million? What is it? So number one, it's valuable to us, so it helps us know what we're looking for. Number two, it's valuable for the prospects, for the donors, so that they know what we're looking for. So once we have that gift chart, I share that with every high-stakes decider that I'm visiting with. And I'm just going to use the example of $10 million. If we're seeking to raise $10 million, I'll put that gift chart in front of them and say something like this. We realize that if we're going to succeed in a project of this magnitude, it's going to result from a very small number of very large gifts and a large number of gifts that are smaller. At the top of that chart, we're going to have a gift that's someplace in the $1.5 to $2 million range. And by sharing the gift chart, it helps define for the giver what we're looking for. And so I'll follow that up with a question: what range of gifts should we be talking about at the appropriate time? And then that's going to allow them to identify a range. And within that range, then I want to ask this question: how will you decide? And so, again, back to your question, Phil, rule of thumb, how to determine the size, and that is determine the size of gifts that the project requires to succeed, and then put that solution in front of our donors and let them tell us what they want to be asked for.
Great. We've got about 5 minutes left. I think we'll take maybe one or two more questions. I know we're not going to get to all of them, but we're going to share some of Kent's contact info. He's pretty active on social media, and I'm sure he wouldn't mind asking answering any questions that we didn't get to. That being said, we've got a question here from Aaron, and Aaron's wondering, how can you pose a time-sensitive ask to someone who seems perpetually busy? So, maybe you get that meeting and you're not going to get another shot at this person ever again. How would you deal with that issue, Ken? Someone that maybe crunched for time and you got one chance to ask and that's it. What would you do in that kind of situation?
Okay, excellent. So, Aaron, I appreciate your question. And the thing that I'm going to do first is gravitate back towards the most highly effective approach, which is a written gift proposal. And so if I think I have only one meeting, the question that I'm going to ask early on is that same question we said earlier is, may I have your permission to prepare a gift proposal that's exactly right for you? And if they say, well, that's why I wanted to meet with you today, then I better have done some preparation with that in mind. And frankly, we work with a very compact outline of the gift proposal that, if necessary, you're going to fill in about 6 blanks, and you're going to have that proposal. And so you may have to do that on the fly, but I'm still going to ask, may I get you a proposal? And in my experience, almost always they're willing to say, yeah, but I need it right away. And so I'll just ask, what is right away? Are you talking later today, by the end of the week? What do you mean by later? But if they insist, you've got audience with me right now, I don't have time for another meeting, I'm not going to open your next email, then I'm going to have in my pocket an outline that has enough of the basics that I can take a pen and, as we visit, fill in the amount, fill in the timeline and so forth, and put that in front of them. The reason the written gift proposal is so important is it tells everybody what it is that we're agreeing or disagreeing around. And so many times that's missing. And another thing I would just share is, and Stephen, you've done a great job of maximizing our time. We obviously have a time limit, but I would invite your attendees to visit kentstroman.com or conversationalfundraising.com, and there's a platform there where we can dialogue further. If you have questions, feel free to contact me, and I'll be happy to respond to them.
Yeah, great, and I'll return that compliment to you, Kent. You actually answered a question, 2 questions with that one answer. So good job by you there. That was nicely done. Yeah, that was great. I know we're approaching the 2 o'clock hour, and I want to be respectful of Kent's time and all the listeners. I know we could probably spend 4 or 5 hours talking about this stuff. I know I could. I'm sure Kent could as well. But we do want to wrap things up. And just so everyone knows, Kent's contact info is there on the screen. Reach out to him. Check out his website. There's a lot of good resources there. Check out his book. I know that's a great read. That comes highly recommended by a lot of our friends and partners as well. And Kent, I'll give you the final word here if you want to tell folks, any additional information about how they can find out about you. I know you mentioned the Institute and the Asking Academy in your website, but any additional tips for reaching out to you?
The only thing I would say, and I'm kind of embarrassed now as I look at the slide that you have on the screen, which I gave you, is that doesn't include the most recent addition in contact, which is kentstroman.com. So feel free to use any of those other avenues, or go straight to my personal website and blog, and I would love to connect through any of those avenues.
Great. Well, thanks, Kent. That was great. We've got a lot of positive feedback in the chat room. Hopefully all you folks enjoyed this as much as I did. I certainly learned a lot. And as you exit the webinar today, you're going to be sent to a little survey. Please share your thoughts with me. I'll get those results. I'm always looking to improve the Bloomerang webinars here, so don't be shy. You won't hurt my feelings with any comments. Let me know what you thought, what you liked, what you didn't like. And that'll help me out a lot as well. So I'll say thanks in advance for those of you who choose to fill that out. We do these webinars once a week. We've got an excellent slate here in March. One I wanted to highlight really briefly is a presentation that's a little unique for us. It's geared towards nonprofit consultants. It's not necessarily geared towards fundraisers at nonprofits, but maybe folks who have businesses, or independent consultancies. You're going to hear some advice from Linda Lysakowski and Susan Schaefer. They're going to share some of their tips from the Nonprofit Consulting Playbook, which actually Kent was a contributor to. That's also an excellent book. You can check that out. He shared his knowledge in that book as well. So if that interests you, check out that webinar. You can see all of our other webinars right there on our page for March. We're going to be joined by Donor Search, We're going to be joined by a CPA firm who's going to share some financial tips for nonprofits. So check that out. You might find something you're interested in there. And just some final housekeeping. I will be sending out Kent's slides as well as a video recording of the whole presentation. So if you wanted to maybe watch it again or check out some of his slides at your leisure, you can do that. So look for an email from me later this afternoon, possibly tomorrow morning, depending on how much YouTube cooperates with me. It's usually pretty kind to me, so I should be able to get that out today. So since it's 2 o'clock, I'll say a final thanks to Kent. Kent, this was great. Thanks a lot for sharing an hour of your time, sharing your knowledge. It was a lot of fun.
You're welcome. You made it easy, Stephen. Thank you.
All right, and thanks to all of you who joined us, who took an hour out of your day, and we'll talk to you soon. So thanks again. Have a great afternoon and a great week.